The old house stood silent, shrouded in a perpetual twilight. Dust motes danced in the faint rays of sunlight that pierced through the gaps in the heavy curtains. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of decay and forgotten memories. At the far end of a narrow hallway, shrouded in an almost palpable darkness, stood a room. Its mahogany door, scratched and weathered, creaked ominously when opened, as if disturbed from a long sleep. And inside, leaning against the far wall, stood the mirror. Tarnished with age, the silvering on its surface had begun to fade, obscuring the reflection with a hazy, dreamlike quality. It was a tall, imposing thing, its ornate frame carved with grotesque faces that seemed to writhe and contort in the flickering candlelight. The mirror had always been there, a silent sentinel bearing witness to the slow decay of the house and the lives that had unfolded within its walls. The floorboards groaned underfoot, their mournful song the only sound in the stillness. Each footstep echoed in the oppressive silence, a stark reminder of the emptiness that permeated every corner of the house. The air grew colder as one approached the mirror, a chill that seemed to emanate from the very glass itself, sending a shiver down the bravest spine. It was as if the air itself held its breath, wary of disturbing whatever presence might lurk within the mirror's depths. She hadn't meant to look, not really. It was just a fleeting glimpse, a moment of curiosity as she passed by the open doorway. But in that single, heart-stopping instant, she saw it. A shadow, darker than the surrounding gloom, lingered in the depths of the mirror. It stood just at the edge of her reflection, a fleeting impression of something tall and gaunt, its edges blurring into the tarnished silvering. A trick of the light, she told herself, her heart pounding against her ribs. The flickering candlelight, the shadows cast by the heavy furniture, all conspired to create illusions in the darkness. But even as she rationalized it away, a shiver of unease ran down her spine. The shadow had seemed so real, so solid, as if it possessed a tangible presence that defied explanation. She moved closer, drawn by a morbid fascination she couldn't quite explain. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw it again, clearer this time. The shadow was still there, lurking at the edge of her reflection. It was taller now, its form more defined, and it seemed to be looking at her, its gaze filled with a chilling intensity that sent a wave of fear washing over her. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch the cold, smooth surface of the glass. Her fingers brushed against something cold, unyielding, sending a jolt of terror through her. It was not the smooth surface of the mirror she felt, but something else, something that lay just beyond the veil of reflection, something that felt disturbingly real. Panic welled up inside her, threatening to overwhelm her. She stumbled back, her eyes never leaving the shadowy figure in the mirror. It remained there, unmoving, its gaze fixed upon her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. The silence in the room pressed in on her, broken only by the frantic beating of her own heart. And then, she heard it. A whisper, faint and indistinct, seemed to emanate from the mirror itself. It was a low, guttural sound like the rasp of a voice long silenced, speaking her name. Her blood ran cold. The whisper was soft, barely audible, yet it cut through the silence like a knife, sending chills down her spine. Terror lent speed to her feet. She turned and fled the room, her breath catching in her throat as she ran. The sound of her own footsteps echoed in the hallway, a frantic counterpoint to the silence that followed her. She didn't dare look back, didn't dare confirm the fear that gnawed at her sanity. But she could feel it, a presence clinging to her, a coldness that seeped into her bones. The house seemed to close in around her, its shadows twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that mirrored the fear twisting in her gut. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind against the windows, sounded like a whispered threat, a promise of something sinister lurking just beyond her perception.